If you're a baby boomer or a Gen Xer and you're pining to go back to those days because that's what you were comfortable in, get over it. Your organization will not be successful sticking to those principles that are clearly super comfortable to me. Pandemic sent everyone home. Everyone realized we can function from home. So think about if the pandemic had hit 7 years earlier, a lot of that technology capability would not really have been widespread. We would have had a real problem economically. We need to recognize that the inventory of things that computers will take on is going to grow dramatically, right up into lots of high white-collar spaces. The real marker of success is your ability to motivate others, to have the empathy to understand how your coworkers or customers are feeling and respond to that, thinking forward to the next opportunity. The softer skills are really important. My father, he said, when you graduate, there's no coming home. You can come to Hawaii, that's fine. But if you come to Hawaii, you're not living with us. That's just the way it's going to be. That was motivating to me. It's like, I got to get a job. By the end of 99, I had finally become a senior vice president, but we were in bad shape from our international expansion. It was really tough. Bank Hawaii has really been running the same strategy for 23 years now, which is basically to be the best bank in Hawaii and the West Pacific. A lot of what drives me today is more on the philanthropic community side, and that really came from my mother's side. Her experience as an immigrant and really being a leader, she'd always say, I don't care what you do, I just care that you do it and you work hard at it and you be good at it.
Greater Good Radio, connect, learn, heal, and grow is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com. Welcome to Greater Good Radio. Today we're with the Chairman, President, and CEO of Bank of Hawaii and the Chairman of the Hawaii Community Foundation, Mr. Peter Ho. Peter, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here, Evan. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great to be here on the street that I grew up on.
Wait, was that in the Peaches house?
Yes.
I know it really well because Danny Kim just bought that
Danny
house.
Kim lives there now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I lived there from the time I was like 3 to 13 years old. So I know the street well. It's a great street.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because on this street, like, there's not too many young people back then, I remember.
Well, when I was young, right, because you're younger than me.
Yeah.
But when I was young, there were young people. Like the people across the street, the Martins who were still here, the Youngs were still here, and the Wheelers were down the street. And, the great thing about the street is it's a double dead end, right? Mm-hmm. And so we just like race our bikes back and forth. It was great.
Martin still works on his boat like every day.
Does he?
Yeah.
So
that guy's still going.
Well, yeah, I know. So I'll tell you an interesting story about Martin. So my grandfather was given a wedding present from his father, my great-grandfather, and it was 2 Koa rockers, okay? And my grandfather gifted those rockers to our family, my father, and so they were in our house across the street from John Martin, who's Martin MacArthur, and John came by one day and said, hey, can I borrow those rockers for a while? And he took them and he just was they're classic. I mean, they're like the real deal, right? And I don't know this for a fact, but I think part of the famous Martin MacArthur rocker kind of has its cultural roots, at least, or design roots in those 2 rockers from my grandfather, given by my great-grandfather on his wedding day.
Wait, do you guys still have them?
I do. Yeah, we do. We do. Yeah.
They're in your house?
Well, they're in storage, so we're between homes right now. But yeah, we still have them.
I bet you he'd love to see that.
John.
He's out there all the time in his yard. Yeah, all the time.
They're a little smaller. I mean, people were smaller back then.
Yeah.
But they look almost identical to the rockers that John's made so famous, right?
You have such strong roots, and we were talking about it as you're coming up today that, especially all the older time Chinese people, they all kind of know each other.
Yeah.
What's your recollection or stories that maybe were passed to you that are kind of interesting from that time period?
I think it was old Hawaii, right? I mean, I was actually, I wasn't born and raised in Hawaii. I was born in New York, and my father was practicing law in New York City, and I was born in April of 1965. And within 2 months, they made the decision to, for him to move back to Hawaii. My mother was from Oregon, so she wasn't from the islands. And so, this is, I grew up in the early 70s, late 60s into the 80s in Hawaii. It was a very different place. It was a more racially segmented place, right? I mean, it just was. It's not like, like I walk around Puno today and like 90% of everyone's Hapa, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like that back then.
Yeah.
And so, obviously my grandfather was deeply tied into the local business community, and in particular the Chinese business community.
Did he go to Puno?
No, he went to McKinley.
McKinley, right? With Hiram Fong and all those
Yeah,
guys.
he was part of that famous class of
Okay.
Maramoto and Hiram Fong and Chin. And no, he went to McKinley. And it was just different. I mean, people kind of hung with their crowd and did business with their crowd, formed capital around their crowd.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, every Sunday I remember having dinner at a different Chinese restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
And it was always like a banquet. I mean, like a whole banquet. And everyone was uncle or auntie, calabash uncle or auntie. And it was just very different. Right? It's so different from the way life is today.
Those parties back then were kind of epic.
Epic.
Yeah.
You can't get food like that anymore.
Because they'd make a lot of it too. And then like the space that they would hold it in is big.
Yeah. I mean, I think, remember, what was it? King's Garden, Kamaki was now the municipal lot. And so when they had big Chinese weddings back then, they would have to have Chinese weddings in 2 restaurants simultaneously because they wanted to invite, 500 people. And there wasn't, we didn't have the big ballrooms like we do today.
Yeah.
So they do like King's Garden and something, Wofat or something. And the bride and groom would like go between both restaurants. And yeah, I mean, those were like, you just can't, you could not replicate those kinds of banquets today. I think I miss them dearly.
That's the thing I was thinking about too, is like our kids will not have that kind of experience with like, family dinners being, 150 people or something. Mm-hmm. It's just different. I remember my gungung, my grandfather he taught me how to kill the pigeon. He's like, come here. I was like, not really. I don't want to. Like, come here. And you have the pigeons. You're like, grab the pigeon. And and then we would get the feathers. It was kind of nasty.
How many years of therapy did that take to dispel?
I forgot about it until we just started talking about it. But man, my grandfather, I know he's a loving man, I think. But, I remember like the way of communication was so different, right? Mm-hmm. It's like they would criticize me to tell me they love me of some sort, right? So I'm down here. I don't know if as you're coming up, there's a jabong tree, right? And I remember we were trying to help because we were, got to help in the yard. And then my brother, who was probably about 5 and I was about 10, it fell on his head. So he started to cry.
Fell on your brother's head?
Yeah. The bullock, it fell on his head, right?
Yeah,
so he's crying. I was probably about 10. And then my grandfather walks over to him and then I don't know if my brother thought he might get a hug or something, but that would be incorrect. Then my grandfather walked over and he slapped him in the head. Bah! He goes, you don't cry. You say, shit, the bullock hit me in the head. And then he walked away. But, that's how it is.
That was like Chinese fatherly love.
Thank you. Thank you.
70s, 80s, yeah.
Yeah. But then again, you'd always provide, it's like actions speak louder than words, right? And didn't have a whole lot of words. So on the flip side, it's like they would always be taking care, always watching out for us. We just don't know it. And it's just so different now. I don't know. It's just really different.
Well, to them, the actions were, that was the operative issue. And the words didn't matter. And usually the words were kind of terse and gruff and rough, right? Yeah. And look, we probably both like have a little more of that genetic DNA makeup than we would like. But that's our heritage, right?
Dude, that's the hardest thing. Is like I spent the last 4 years like in all kinds of different healing practices and therapeutic models and learning things and so on. And now I can speak as, when this happens, I feel this. And it's like so awkward, like brushing my teeth with my foot or something, because I'm not used to that. Yeah, I'm used to my father telling me he loves me by calling me a clown. You know what I mean? Like it, and like okay, and then we joke around.
That's pretty good. Yeah, and it's important. We've got 2,000 people in the bank, and most of them are. The generations have really turned. The baby boomer generation is like a severe minority now. People don't really think about that, but that's true. Gen X, which I am, is a very small sliver. It always has been a small cohort. And so we're deeply into the millennial and Gen Z, and it's a different crowd. Those generations are just different, for sure.
What are your thoughts on how to, I guess, cultivate all the generations to get the best out of it and the best for them? You know what I mean? It's so different.
I think it begins with the recognition of being, if you are the leader of any organization, but certainly an organization of scale, you're going to have those generational cohorts represented. And if you're a baby boomer or a Gen Xer and you're pining to go back to those days because that's what you were comfortable in, get over it, because they're not, and you won't be successful. Your organization will not be successful sticking to, those principles that are, I think clearly super comfortable to me. And I think you probably remember kind of a lot of those ethos as well. It's kind of foreign to, somewhat distasteful to a lot of the newer generation. So one, I think, is recognition. I mean, you just got to let go. And because, forming a whole organization of people that are baby boomers today would just not be a good idea, probably not even possible. And then, so I think acceptance, and then too, begin to understand the differences in these cohorts. And there are differences. And, I think very clearly, and you hear this a lot, this kind of banter between these generations around, well, that generation just doesn't work as hard as my generation. Well, first of all, I think that's an age-old situation. I think every generation feels that way about the last generation. Yeah. But secondly, I mean, I think that there is, more of a line in the sand today. And a lot of that, I think, has been driven by kind of what they've seen in their own parents, their own family units, and kind of the consequences of, people putting work 100% ahead of everything else. And I also think that technology and the way kids learn today, I mean, I know your kid that, is a classmate with Khan, our son, they just think differently. Yeah. Oh, I was, playing, simple math percentages with them, like, well, what's 10% of this? And they kind of look at me like, who cares? I mean, what does it matter if you can calculate that in your head? They're capable of much more complex things.
That's Chinese blasphemy.
That's what I told them. What you can't figure out simple percentages? Yeah. What's wrong with you? Yeah. It's like, that's what we do.
Chinese blasphemy. We're always calculating.
It's so
what
crazy.
Did you graduate? All these things.
Yeah.
Doing the math.
But it's different. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is really different. And it's different, but not worse. And it's different and better in a lot of ways. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, these newer age cohorts are incredibly sophisticated around technology. I mean, they're they truly are digital natives. I mean, their ability to get things done at a rate of speed far faster than older people is really interesting and amazing.
What do you think also about, gig economy and so many options that people have these days as well? You know what I mean? Because why would they work so hard and suffer if they don't have to?
Yeah, and that's kind of putting on my Banco hat. That's a little bit the bane of any large 125-year-old organization's existence, right? Because for so much of our history, our success was built on people wanting to be there for 30 years. I've been at Bankway for over 30 years, right? And a lot of my contemporaries, same thing. And I don't think that, that's not a naturally attractive track for younger people today. It just isn't. They want to experience things. I think they're much more comfortable shifting in their lives between, now for the next couple of years, I got to concentrate more on myself or my family, and then I'll get into profession. I mean, you don't have that linear rise like I think prior age cohorts did. So it's a big challenge. And I think the challenge is, it's upon the institutions. It's not upon the labor sources. I mean, they're going to do what they want to do. So then it's a matter of kind of chunking up what it is, the processes that we need to get done, what we need to get done in ways that are appealing to these new types of workers.
And these days, a lot of that's going to be automated.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that I think is super fascinating is really the past couple 3 years, really, kind of, I think these trends were happening, but really accelerated by the pandemic, right?
Or by AI.
Yeah. Well, the pandemic sent everyone home. Everyone realized I can work from home, and companies realized we can function from home. And think about if the pandemic had hit 5-7 years earlier, a lot of that technology capability would not really have been widespread. We would have had a real problem economically. But the pandemic hit when it hit. People went home. People found that they could get their jobs done as well as have a lot more home life, a lot more flexibility. And that was a good thing. Now, companies want increasingly people to come back to work. Increasingly, people don't want to come back to work. And so that's a problem. And then to your point, what's crashing down on everything right now, like feels like in the last 12 months, call it, right, is AI, which has been around for a long time, but I think is finally beginning to seize its moment in time, right?
Yeah.
And the combination of people's work preferences, age cohort changeouts, and AI, I think fundamentally changes how labor gets done in lots of different industries. I mean, I think if we think forward 5 years, certainly 10 years, like how we do things today will be radically different from how things are done, in the future.
So if you were entering the workforce now, or maybe you'd been in for, 5-6 years, what would be the things that you would be focusing on right now, knowing what you know?
Anything that a computer can't do well, right? I mean, so AI is really computers doing more things and doing more things better, right? That's basically it, right? But will a computer ever be able to motivate a team? Doubtful. Will a computer ever be able to truly, drop in that creative element or creative juice into a process or a product or a service? Doubtful. Will a computer ever be able to have the empathy to understand when an organization's not feeling great and really needs to, take a step back and think about what do we need to do culturally as an organization to get ourselves on a better track? I don't think computers will ever be able to do that. So I think for the human race, we need to recognize that the inventory of things that computers will take on is going to grow dramatically, right up into lots of high white collar spaces. And, so for our kids, and, our kids are about the same age, they've got to be thinking about that. And, if they don't want to be replaced by a computer, then they've just got to think through to what are the requisite skills that, computers just aren't going to get to. And there are lots of them, and they're more interesting things, and they're higher value things, but they've got to consciously push in that direction, I think.
So keeping that in mind, because what I just heard were primarily human skills, right? What people would sometimes refer to as soft skills or people skills,
Yeah.
right? Now if you flip back now, right, as the CEO of a large organization, how are you recognizing that and then fostering it or recruiting it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'll be candid. It begins with the recognition that we haven't done it exceptionally well. And I'm speaking kind of broadly for corporations, maybe American corporations, that well to begin with. And what I mean by that is, I think, and certainly in banking and finance and some of the harder industries, if you will, manufacturing, there's always been a premium placed on hard skills, right? So we were joking about can you master, percentages, right? And they're like, well, that's like a smart person, right? Well, kind of. I mean, you can do simple math, big deal, right? What we find increasingly, and I think what's been really resident for a long time, is that, the people that are really going to make a difference in your organization are bright people. And the technical skills required, especially with automation, computer automation to date, kind of what we have available today, most people can master those things pretty easily. If you're reasonably bright, reasonably intelligent, put the effort in early in your career, like kind of by the time you're 30, 35, you've mastered that, right? And the real marker of success is your ability to motivate others, your ability to have the empathy to understand how your coworkers or parts of the organization or customers or vendors are feeling and respond to that, thinking forward to the next opportunity, right? Those, the softer skills. And I think we've always recognized, soft skills are really important. We've done a not so good job of trying to develop people into those skills. We try much harder today. But I think we're playing catch up because, we're trying to make up for lost time, frankly. And that span is just growing because of technology, right? And so, I do feel a lot of pressure around leadership development. I do feel a lot of pressure around, building soft skills throughout the organization. And interestingly, technology kind of is helpful in that way as well, right? So we have some wonderful training and development tools today that are off the shelf that, our design team.
They can help with soft skills or
Yeah.
just in general?
Yeah. Like, feeling safe in the workplace, building workplace safety, developing followership, communication skills, building empathy. I mean, these
Just like
are
asynchronous online courses or something.
Yeah, they are online. The chassis is online, and they are built by really smart people that are experts in this, in these particular subject verticals. And what they do is they, the product is they create a product where one of our managers can take the course and learn how to teach the course and teach the course in concert with kind of the online component. And super powerful. And, I think giving us some real upside there.
Are those expensive?
No, they're not. And so, we've got a good library of that. We've got a couple of vendor sources, and they do great work. And that's really kind of at the mid-level. And now as we're thinking about, more the executive level, kind of their needs, kind of where we're trying to develop them is a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit narrower, but deeper. And so, their outfits, just to throw out like master class, right? I mean, if you can take a course, effectively take a course on negotiation from a former NYPD hostage negotiator, why wouldn't you do it?
Like Chris Voss.
Yeah.
That's one, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that's where we see the, frankly, the weakness in our development and like where we're trying to accelerate to cover off on that.
So if you're talking about that, then I heard like kind of middle tier and then executive tier in that. What are the most important skills that you're seeing? Oh, there's some lack here that needs to be developed. What's the most important ones for the middle tier to accelerate and for the top tier?
I would say middle tier, top tier, not too much difference. Maybe just kind of you emphasize different things. But again, I kind of go to the soft skills. And it really has to do with, how do I build the best team I possibly can?
That's the question everyone's asking or you're asking?
Well, that's a question that successful managers in our organization ought to be asking, right? To be successful, right? And how do I assess my team today? How do I develop the needs of people that needs developed? How do I retain the people that are just absolute all-stars, keep them motivated? What's going to drive them? Where do I have shortfalls? How do I go out and get those shortfalls in the marketplace? Or do I find them internally? How do I drive an organization that, we're Hawaii-based, we're Bank of Hawaii, we always will be. So how do I ensure that my team reflects the spirit of Hawaii, but also at the same time infuses the skill sets and the technology knowledge that we need?
So that's cultural.
Probably from the outside. Right. So how do you blend cultures, bring culture from the outside or talent from the outside and kind of imbue them into the culture of the organization? And those are pretty sophisticated.
That would be so
skills.
Hard asynchronous wise though, I would think.
It is.
That's experiential.
It absolutely is.
You got to get out there.
To me, to us, kind of the demarcation line around success, right? I mean, so, and this is forever will be the challenge of Hawaii, where we're this beautiful, incredible place that, you and I grown up here, love it here, never want to leave here. But, we don't have all the talent in the world. I was in New York last week. It's another island, but that's an island like overflowing with talent, right? In Hawaii, we've got
and
great
capital.
people and capital and new ideas and people willing to take risks. I mean, all those things.
Although I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah, I know exactly. I was
They
there.
got good-
I mean, I lived there for 4 years. I loved it. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to go. It's just like I just can't. I'm ready to leave. I'm ready to like migrate back west. But anyway, I think the world's changing so rapidly. I'll just use Bank of Hawaii as an example, right? We will only be successful as long as we are the Bank of Hawaii for the people of Hawaii, right? That's super important, right? But kind of the content of what that means for our consumers and our business customers is changing, evolving dramatically, online versus branch, all of the steps, right? And so our ability to bring in talent externally, kind of get them acclimated to the culture, the location, the climate, get them working with our longstanding employees who've been at the firm for a while, understand our culture, understand our brand, understand what we're trying to do in the marketplace. That's everything. That's like running a 21st century call center is different today. And we've improved that operation dramatically. And you need a really good call center operation to be successful in financial services today, right? Having a great online mobile experience is table stakes, right? That doesn't natively grow in Honolulu, right? You've got to bring that talent in. But those platforms have to feel like of Hawaii, that feel like this is something Bank of Hawaii would provide. So kind of bringing that blend together is critical. So kind of finding that external talent, luring them in, bringing them in, getting them acclimated, getting them to understand kind of the specialness of this marketplace. To us, as we think about like what makes our success in the next 10, 20 years, that's what it is, like full stop.
So when you look at importing in talent, right, the red flag a lot of times is, can they last, right? So I heard that the steps that you mentioned, which was recruit them in, acclimate them in that order, right? Acclimate them, make sure they can be a part of the community or so on. To me, I see that if that doesn't work, doesn't happen, then it's like 18 months, 2 years, they're gone.
Right.
You seeing that same?
Yeah. And so, I mean, so in my experience is that it's darn near impossible to figure out who's going to do well coming to Hawaii. It's like, it's so weird. It's like some people you hire and you're like, well, you know, hiring that individual and I don't know. I mean, if nothing will get them for a year, right? And they stay for 20. And we've got lots of people like that. And they love the islands. They just like immediately click in. And then there are those that are from Hawaii that you lure back and they come back and like, God, you know, I forgot how small this place is. And I want to go back to New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco. So I think you never know. I think one thing that we've tried to do is to maybe punch a bit above our weight, selling a vision and a vision really of, look, you know, we're a publicly traded company in this really special place and we're of a size where, you know, you can make a difference, like your own two hands can make a difference. But we're big enough and we have enough scale to be successful for many generations to come. And that seems to kind of attract, you know, a lot of interesting people.
AKA, we're going to make you work.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly.
Chinese special, we got here, you get this. AKA, you're going to work, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
You can affect change because your team going to be smaller. But, you know, if they're here for, I don't know if I want to call them the right reasons, but the reasons that will typically keep people to stay, which is they're acclimated into the community. You know what I mean? They feel a part of the place.
Yeah.
Your spouse fits in, or you get a new spouse or something, you know what I mean? Kids feel comfortable. And I've seen it, right? I've seen people move here. We have a lot of friends like that where they move away because it's like, okay, we're going to move away now. And then the kids or so on is like, no, I want to go back. And then a year or two, boom, they're back.
Yeah. I mean, and you've identified, you know, the pieces, right? So it's the executive, it's the talent, right? And usually the talent's like, you know, probably if you've done your homework, it's probably 65% probability that, you know, they're doing important work. They're building their network at work. Maybe things change a little bit with work from home. I don't know. But generally that's a pretty good, you know, take that percentage. But then there's the partner, right? The trailing spouse. And that's more like a 50% probably, right? And their ability, his or her ability to integrate in, it's challenging. Hawaii's kind of can be a closed place, and call that 50%. And then there's the kids, and the kids are probably more like 60%, you know, because kids are kids, right? But not, you know, they don't always integrate in. So assuming the family is going to stick together, like here's how the math works. It's 65% times 50% times 60%. That's a small percentage. Yeah. So it's a tough game.
Yeah. So what are you thinking in terms of trying to develop internal talent versus like importing, you know, it's like make versus buy kind of, right? What's your thoughts on that now, given the current market space and talent pool and so on?
That's an area that I think we've got a lot of work to do in this town. And, you know, I believe, and I think increasingly, I think the governor feels this, that kind of the single biggest existential economic threat to the islands is housing, right? Because simply, if you don't have quality housing, if you don't have housing, right? Who's going to come back? Who's going to stay?
Who can?
No, you're right. I mean, you put it, you know, the right way. Like, who can? And we're at a crossroads. And so, you know, as we look out, what's happened nationally is there's actually a lot of housing inventory being built on the mainland. Probably too much, frankly. I mean, I think a lot of those markets, if you go to the Sun Belt, you know, Phoenix, Austin, parts of the South, I mean, they're going to have their day that's not so good just because there's going to be a gut of supply. Not so much in the islands. And so from a banker's perspective, yeah, okay, the markets will be, in line. But from a policy standpoint, from kind of a future of Hawaii standpoint, it's a big challenge for us. And so, before we even begin to think about like what sorts of visions do we plant in front of, either, our keiki o aina or people that want to move here, we've got to resolve like simple things like, dwellings, right?
Yeah.
Availability of dwellings.
Especially now, the way that globalization and there's, quite a bit of wealth out there.
Mm-hmm.
They can come in and this housing market's actually pretty cheap for them.
Yep.
To be able to work the type of work they do.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, I understand, putting the kibosh on VRBO rentals, Airbnb rentals. I mean, okay. But that's still, that's not going to get at the root of the issue. The root of the issue is you got to build good starter quality, mid-level quality housing, period. And lots of it.
How you can do that?
Unless
it goes straight up.
It's got to go straight up. We can't be a white picket fence marketplace. We just don't have the land for it. Interestingly, when you look at, there is, I think, still a policy thought around, I think it's called 21st Century Schools. And when you think about when you ride by like Kamaki High School on Date Street, you're like, wow, that's a big piece of land, right? And you think like the ability to, use the land as subsidy and build vertical housing and maybe provide an additional incentive to teachers, which is like a cohort that we're even, in greater need of, right? And at the same time, kind of bring the school up to standard. Seems like a pretty reasonable approach. And so I'm not sure that the raw availability of land is the problem. I think the problem more becomes, it's kind of like, I've seen the enemy and it is us. It's like, a lot of NIMBYism, a lot of best efforts to do development, but being stalled by neighborhoods and by, if you're a homeowner, you probably don't have as much incentive to want, additional housing as the person that doesn't own a home, right? It's kind of that simple.
So if we talk about education, because you're a Punahou trustee as well,
yeah,
right?
Yep.
You're looking at it from the perspective of someone who sees the macro view of pretty much Hawaii, and then in one of the larger companies. So you're saying the biggest issue in our organization, one of the biggest issues is the lack of the people skills, the human skills, and so on. But at the same time, if you look at, let's call it public education, everything is STEM, tech, that's why I looked at it and said, okay, you take away the arts, you take away the music, you take away the PE and so on, because you want to focus on all the STEM and tech. Well, then you just took away all the support network, all their ability to co-regulate with others. And then we wonder why young people have, a lot of anxiety and issues around that. So
right.
What's the deal? What's your you see things macro, plus you have kids. So what's your thoughts on that?
It's a challenge, and I don't envy Keith Hayashi by any stretch of the imagination. That is an incredibly tough job, and there's a lot of bureaucracy attached to the system. And yeah, it's an awesome challenge, right? But you're right. I think we have a minimum standards issue that we want to get to. I think perhaps we've made some progress there. We probably have a curriculum challenge, and I think if I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but, if the leaders of the DOE had their way, I'm sure that they'd wave a magic wand and kind of change the curriculum. But that's hard to do when you're having a hard time just maintaining teacher counts, right? So the only thing I can think of, is there a way to subsidize the education system somehow? Maybe kind of blurring the massive amounts of land that the DOE is in possession of to render, some housing and maybe some revenue. The ability to refresh those schools is a thought. I don't know. I don't know exactly how that plays out. I think kind of maybe a refreshed idea around like, what is it that we want our kids to be good at?
That's exactly what I was moving toward.
Yeah.
Which is, regardless of the constraints, like you as the CEO of Bank of Hawaii and been in that organization for that long, like what would be the classes or the skills that you would like to see developed in there that are not being developed by the time they get to you?
Well, yeah, I take a step back, and I suspect that if we were to ask 100 parents from the school system, like, what do you want for your kids? You'd get probably 90 different answers, right? So not a lot of crossover. So then I think it falls upon leadership policymakers to kind of decide, like, where is Hawaii's future? What sorts of industry, what sorts of businesses, what sorts of industrial verticals make sense? What do kids want? What do kids want to be learning right now? And kind of push the curriculum in that direction. That, I think, is kind of step one.
So that's kind of like more, I think, globally thinking, but like as the CEO of Bank of Hawaii, right? And you look at, let's say, the local talent that comes into the organization, then what would you add in, if you could say I can add in these 3 skills that they would come out of that would give them that advantage in the organization to not just produce results, but feel better about themselves? You know what I mean? Like, what would it be? Because you wouldn't take them in if they can't do any math. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one.
Yeah.
But what would be the skills?
Yeah, it's hard to answer the question, Evan, because I don't want to leave the impression that the people we hire into Bank of Hawaii we feel are inadequate because by dint of their schooling. We don't.
No, it's more like...
That's definitely not the case. But
or they'd be good at this.
Yeah.
Period. You know what I mean? Everybody would come in at least at a minimum standard. You know what I mean? They'd be good at it.
But we would love to see an expansion of capability or capacity would be around things that are driven more by things like the arts or physical education or, band or, things that help you build creativity, things that help you build community, things that help you kind of dream about, the possible.
Yeah.
I definitely see it in a lot of private school curriculum for sure. And it's probably not at the same level in the public school curriculum.
A lot of them have to raise their own funds just to get that kind of teacher there.
Right.
Some do, you know what I mean?
It's hard enough getting teachers right now in the system. For sure. I
Yeah.
don't envy the situation for sure.
If you were Khan's age right now, knowing what you know now, what industry would you go into? Let's say you could be 18 years old again or 17 years old again. I go, but you know what you know now.
I think the rate of disruption is going to be pretty extreme. I think that the crossover globally is going to be pretty extreme. It's already happening.
You mean in general?
Yeah, in general. And so I kind of grew up a pretty normal college graduate, right? I mean, I had a degree in finance and accounting, and I had a very U.S. domestic approach to kind of what I wanted to be exposed to. And I think I would probably, if I were smart enough at this point to think forward, be like, well, I need to think more globally. I need to think about opportunities, experiences globally. I need to learn how to build and manage myself within multicultural cultures. I need to be able to deal with change a lot better than I was geared to do, way back when, because that's just going to come. So kind of back to the soft skills, right? And so what I would do and what I try to coach young people to do is not think so much about, how much am I going to make from this job or what's the title and is it a sexy industry or not? But like, what am I going to learn from it? Like, what are the skills that I'm going to get out of this over the next couple of years? And how do I apply that to the next set of skills that I'm trying to pick up? But they're different. I mean, I think they're really dealing with change, dealing with ambiguity, dealing with people, dealing with different types of people. I also think one of the big issues and one of the things that Hawaii is actually pretty good at is just simply working with people. And I feel like when you're on the mainland, there is much more polarization around issues, politics and otherwise than here in the islands. And I think that's a good thing for the islands. But having the skill set to kind of navigate that and negotiate, that's important for a young person as well. Probably different from 30 years ago.
What do you see then as key kind of either unfair advantages or strategic advantages for people raised in Hawaii, your Hawaii-raised workforce that would be applicable anywhere?
Yeah. Well, lots, so many. We live on islands. So there's a natural understanding of resource constraint. I think people in Hawaii get that, right? Just like intuitively get that. That can't be lost as an opportunity, just how people are raised and kind of what's kind of embedded in who they are. I think Hawaii's always been. I mean, we talked early in the podcast about kind of back, when we were kids, it was a more racially segregated community. It was, but the thing about Hawaii is there's always a way to get along. There always has been a way to get along. And I think that, the ability to work somewhat harmoniously between and amongst different sets of people, whether it's socioeconomic sets or racial sets or ideology sets. I think we're pretty good at that. And I don't think the world is actually necessarily good at that. So I think that's another space that, Hawaii naturally kind of provides, right? Just kind of by dint of our community and our marketplace and our, the INA, right? And then finally, kind of back to sustainability. And we do have at our disposal more power sources than just about any place on the planet. And I think that's valuable. And that can be rendered into, for sure we can generate more power on our own. And that's good. That's important. But the ability to use those outcomes to build knowledge and sell more into a knowledge economy, I think is definitely there as well. So when you kind of think about all of those elements, I guess maybe the last piece that I would add in there is, we are home to the 4 component commands. The seat of military power is out of Hawaii, right? And there's a lot of stuff that comes along with that. A lot of people, a lot of civilians that have a lot of knowledge. And so that knowledge capability, the ability for that to bleed over into other forms of industry, I think is there as well. So when you take all of those elements, the way I like to think about it, that's got to build into some form of opportunities enough to offset the needs of 1.4 million people. And because that's the other thing, right? We're not a very big state by population, right? And we should be able to take care of ourselves, I think, given the natural resources that we have.
So I'm going to go back to my other one. If you couldn't put banking, you couldn't do the banking, but you're young again, going into your career, then what would you choose? Or where would you start? What would you do to start?
If I step back and think about what was my process back then, right?
No, now.
No, I know. But yeah, to compare and contrast, right? I thought, well, you're kind of into this banking thing. So, where should you go to do that? Well, it's New York City, right? So I did that. And I always thought in the back of my mind, I want to get back to Hawaii. I mean, it was my vision was to get back to the islands, to raise a family in the islands, to be a member of the community in the islands, a member of the business community, and, do community-based things as well, right?
Why?
I can't answer that. I mean, just because I thought in my mind that was kind of the perfect thing for me, right? I always felt like I wanted to get back to Hawaii. I couldn't really imagine myself living in New Jersey and commuting into Manhattan every day. That just didn't turn me on, right? And so kind of those are the paths that I took. You could argue that maybe back in the 80s, Hawaii was a more attractive destination because things were more affordable, whatever, right?
It was booming.
It was booming.
In the 80s.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I landed, I came back to Hawaii in 1993, which is about 15 minutes before the bottom fell out for a decade. So yeah, I remember it well. Today, I'd probably take the same approach, and probably finance is a different kind of business today.
You can't go finance.
Yeah, yeah, and
I cut it out. You can't do that.
Okay, so no finance.
Yeah.
So where's the opportunity? Clearly is in technology, right? The opportunity clearly is in life sciences, healthcare. You think about healthcare is on a collision with existentialism. We can't continue to make healthcare a growing and growing part of overall GDP and think that's going to be okay. So obviously, lots of disruption solutions have to be coming into healthcare, right? So I'd be thinking towards industries where there's going to be opportunity, and then kind of back to the Hawaii question. And that's, I think it's a little bit of a sad answer right now, to be honest. And I've got the benefit of having 2 kids who are, freshmen in high school and junior in high school. And one, our son's like, I'm not coming back to Hawaii. I don't see what's there for me. And he loves the islands. He plays football and he's got lots of different kinds of friends, which is kind of sad to me. Yeah. And then Leah, our daughter's like, no, I'm definitely coming back to Hawaii, but I'm going to become a billionaire first before I come back to Hawaii. I'm like, okay, well, you do that, Leah. That'd be great. But, kind of embedded in those answers is this idea that you can't do well in Hawaii. And I think that's kind of a lot of what we're dancing around right now, talking about. And that's a big problem.
So when you said you landed here just before the bottom fell out,
yeah,
it's like the peak, right? You come in back at peak of the market, and then it's like, I just bought at the wrong time.
Yeah, that's exactly when I came back.
What was going through your mind? And how'd you come back? They recruited you or what?
Well, so I graduated from Punahou, went to USC, got my degree in finance, moved to New York and did the New York banking thing for 4 years. Then went back and got my MBA. And
At USC?
At USC. And finished early. I was like in such a rush to like get my MBA and get on with my career. Like I finished like a semester early, which was like, I still think back and think, well, why would I do that? It's kind of stupid. You should have just enjoyed the semester. But anyway, I came home in January 93. And I remember having conversations with business school friends and telling them, it's between going back to New York and like doing the New York thing for another several years and then coming back to Hawaii, which was kind of interesting. I mean, that's what I knew. It was interesting. I had friends back there. I liked the industry. Or come to Hawaii and like, trying to kind of reestablish myself in the islands again. And I said, I'm going to Hawaii because the economy's doing really well. It was like
Booming.
It was booming, and the Persian Gulf War had just ended, and it wasn't apparent to us that kind of for some reason that war spelled the end of kind of the Japanese tourism buildup as well as the Japanese capital inflow, and everything just started to recede from there. Yeah. And so
you're talking about Asian financial crisis, SARS,
and all that
all
stuff,
the
like
above.
crashing into into itself. And Bank Foy made me an offer to come home. I took it. Jack Sui was still at Bank Foy at the time, and I'd known him for many years, and so I came back.
That was before Larry Johnson became
When I joined in '93, Larry was the president, and by the next year, Larry had become the CEO.
Oh,
right. And so, Larry was CEO early in my career.
So if Jack recruits you to Banco, then how come you didn't go with him to First Hawaiian?
That's a good question. It's a little more complicated than that. So I came home, started at Banco. There's that whole interesting, for Merchant Street interesting, where, Jack leaves to go to First Hawaiian Bank and Larry's still at Bank Foy. And I had actually by then started working for a guy by the name of Alton Koyoka, who was, is and was a great mentor to me. And so I did that for a couple of years. But to be honest, I kind of thought, this banking thing in Hawaii is not quite like the banking I'm used to back east.
That's commercial banking then.
Yeah. And the Scheidler Group was a client. And they called up one day and said, hey, why don't you come work with us? So I actually left Bank Foy.
They meaning Jay? Or?
Well, Jay and his team, the Scheidler Group. It's a very small group. And Jay's, he's a brilliant guy doing really crazy, interesting financial stuff. So it was hard to say no, right? And so I did that. And it was good. I mean, I worked for him for a year and did some really interesting, fascinating things. But then Bank Foy came calling back because, there was a lot of churn between Bank Foy and First Hawaiian going on.
And the economy was still kind of junk.
And the economy was terrible, really bad. I mean, remind me of that in a second. Yeah. So I'll finish off this piece. So basically what I was left with was a decision to stay, basically working for an entrepreneur, which was exciting, but kind of different at the same time. And you're working for one person, right? And the allure was to go back and, kind of work for a company, work in a larger institution. So I made the decision to go back to Bank of Hawaii, and that's what I did, and kind of been there ever since.
The economy was still bad, and go back to it. So,
yeah, the economy was it was probably a few people that will listen to this podcast will remember all these slogans, staying alive till 95. Remember that? Then there was the ERTF, the Economic Revitalization Task Force, that was really kind of a Merchant Street construct. And I mean, it was a rough period for the islands, and it was hard on the Bank of Hawaii as well.
So during that time period, you're SVP?
I became an SVP, a senior, kind of a quote, a senior executive, in the late 90s. Yeah. And the bank went through a lot of change. One of the things that we tried to do to get around the challenge of the islands was to expand internationally, which was really difficult. I mean, it was, look, I think it was a fine idea. It turned out to be harder to do. And so many things, fate gets in the way, and you get the Asian financial crisis and things, and you're not going to survive that, right? And so it put a lot of pressure on the organization.
So did you always want to be the CEO?
I'm not sure that I always wanted to be the CEO. when I came home, what I knew I wanted to do was to have a good living and raise a family. And, it's expensive in Hawaii, right? So I knew that I wanted to be senior. I did have this vision that I wanted to be very active in the community and be, kind of a community member leader. So definitely those things, I definitely thought in my mind, that's what I want in coming back to the islands. But I don't know that I ever thought, I want to be the CEO of the organization.
So when did you know that you would be the CEO, or is it only once they say, okay, you're going to be the CEO? Or are they grooming you kind of thing? Or like, how does that work?
In the world of public companies, like nothing is for certain, right? So you kind of begin with that. Things could change tomorrow, and things change dramatically. By the end of '99, I had finally become a senior vice president and was pretty senior in the organization. But we were in bad shape from our international expansion, and had to make a change at the top. And, that was tough. It was really tough. Because we were, Bank Foy, a local company. A guy by the name of Mike O'Neill came in, who, just probably by luck, just turned out to be like an incredible business person, executive turnaround expert. Just all of those things, but also somehow understood Hawaii really well. He was just kind of an extraordinary person in that regard. And I was, frankly, probably not senior enough to blame for some of the challenges that happened, but senior enough to want to keep around. And that's exactly what happened. So kind of lucky, right? And kind of knew the territory, was able to help rebuild the organization, which, Bank Foy, once we made the decision to basically place all of our eggs back into the Hawaiian shell, things got good again really fast. It's hard to get away from the market position and the brand value of the organization. And so once we decided, let's get out of New York and California and Asia and the South Pacific and just focus on Hawaii and to a lesser extent on the West Pacific, or to an additional extent on the West Pacific, but much more compact footprint, things got better really fast. And so that was kind of the next chapter. Bank Foy has really been running the same strategy for 23 years now, which is basically to be the best bank in Hawaii and the West Pacific.
How much longer you want to do that as a bank leader?
It's incredibly rewarding. It's incredibly challenging job. But yeah, you're right. I've been doing it a long time. I've been president for 15 years now. I've been CEO for 13 years. Kind of you asked, like, when did you know you were going to be the CEO? Probably around the time of the kind of refresh of the organization. So it goes back to the early 2000s, right? So yeah, everyone has their shelf life.
It's 20-something years.
Yeah. I think that we're, in a really great position right now. And we've got some incredible talent, around me. We've got incredible talent even like one layer down. That's been hard fought, hard scrabble efforts we need to fill this space or that space. And the whole team's been great at helping to do that. So I feel very fortunate that, we've got great succession in place. And at some point in the future, I'll make that move, because either something terrible will happen and the board will get rid of me, or it'll just be time to move on. And, at some point, no matter how well you've done, organizations kind of need change, right? And there will be that appropriate time, and, we'll figure out when that is.
With that being said, then, Hawaii Community Foundation, right? You guys have a huge role, especially now with Maui and all that. What would you say is like your most important kind of focus over there?
First of all, Hawaii Community Foundation was an amazing organization that was steeled, interestingly, through the pandemic, right? So the pandemic happens and the organization transforms from being kind of a typical but exceptionally well-run community foundation, like lots of community foundations in the country, to somewhat of a go-to organizational entity for the private sector, the public sector, the not-for-profit sector, and all of the needs.
So it's now the hub.
Yeah, that's probably a little bit too strong of a term, but yeah, definitely a focal point, right? For sure,
a connector.
Under the extraordinary leadership of Mike Akane, who, to know him is to know that, here's someone that could be doing anything in the world and chooses to run Hawaii Community Foundation. So you have that extraordinary leadership and extraordinary team of people. And so, kind of the pandemic came and went, and it was painful, but, the foundation kind of positioned itself as a connector, built relationships through the counties and the state and, all different layers of government, policymakers, the not-for-profit community. Coming out of that, actually had pre-existing agreements with the county of Maui around, okay, well, if we ever have like a disaster, like here's how we would game plan this. So kind of the Maui Strong Fund was already like prepackaged, if you will. And then, sadly, August 8th happened, a day that changed the lives of so many people, I think everyone in the state really. And HCF jumped into action. And it's just, I think, done a marvelous job partnering with the county, partnering with the not-for-profit community on Maui and statewide and globally, being seen as a trusted brand such that I think we've been able to raise capital in an extraordinary way and big enough where we can have the governance and the operational pieces to make sure that things are getting to the right place and we're accounting for it and the public understands where their money is going. So yeah, it's been an extraordinarily challenging. So HCF is doing all of that while still running its day business, right? And that's been tough. But, we've got extraordinary people there. Mike is an extraordinary leader. And, we're kind of, I think, pushing through the acute stage of the crisis, the situation. But this is going to be a long-standing, will be measured in years, not months.
I've heard you mention that Micah, you have like the utmost respect for him. And you said something along the lines of like he could do anything. So could you share maybe a story that would illustrate either that or something that is heartwarming, meaningful to you?
Micah is like, you've met Micah, right?
Just in passing.
It doesn't pass. Yeah. Okay. Well, he's an imposing guy. He's a big guy, just a big connect,
like
right?
Physically
imposing guy.
Yeah, but sophisticated.
Yeah. But he's got a heart of gold and he's very emotional. And like when he starts talking about something that's meaningful to him or a situation, like he can be brought to tears like extremely easily. So here you have like this guy who looks like incredibly imposing, like who's just kind of like a waterfall. And that's him. He's a guy that, we talked a little bit about soft skills, right? And so here's someone who's incredibly bright and talented and gifted, but his greatest gift may be his heart and his ability to pour his heart into things in an intelligent way, right? Into endeavors or causes.
So can you think of a story that will encompass that?
He's kind of an original article, right? And somebody who comes from a pretty humble background, Big Island, made his way through college playing football, came back, kind of was a Republican in a Democratic state, survived doing, running the DHHL. But, I see him out networking with national, international figures, and they're drawn to him, and he can connect with them, and he can kind of drive the message of HCF and the state, the broader state, extremely effectively to these people, and he has that connection, which is kind of rare, right? It's kind of different. So that's what I mean when I talk about, his ability to, he can take that skill and do anything he wants with it. He chooses to kind of use that as a conduit for the greater good and for HCF.
So do you have like a personal story or memory in regards to your community work or HCF that just feels so meaningful to you when it comes up like, wow, this is why I do this kind of stuff?
I think that the reality of the pandemic, it's a 100-year pandemic, and Hawaii is so vulnerable. We don't probably think about it as much as we should, but we are. And at the front end of the pandemic, as you recall, we were using Aloha Stadium as a food distribution center, and our HCF was all over that. They were manning it, funding it, coordinating things, and those lines were, and this was early. We didn't know, like, could this be like a year or like what? We didn't know quite yet that the government was going to helicopter several $1 trillion, out the windows. So we thought this could be a reality for a while. And just being part of the organization that was so much part of that solution at that acute point in time in the pandemic. It's just something I was very proud to be part of in a small way, in a very small way. And then kind of we learned those lessons, learned a lot. Fast forward the Maui fires and our ability to stand up and be supportive like within hours, literally within hours, is another thing that I'm incredibly proud of. And, I think Micah's and his team's ability to really understand what's happening on the ground and to have the connections to understand what's happening on the ground on Maui is a real difference maker, and was really afforded by, the organization that is HCF.
So could you share a story that gives context from your early life that would give context to would it help me understand or others understand who Peter Ho is today, especially that ones that people may not readily know?
I think that I was fortunate enough to be, part of, a pretty well-known business family in town, right? And that, we talked about some of those stories earlier, and it was fun. And, those are experiences that, very few kids get to experience. But on my mother's side, her parents came to the States. They somehow settled in Oregon from China. So she's an immigrant, right? And her experience, she very gifted, she passed away several years ago, but very gifted student, kind of worked her way through Stanford. My parents met on the mainland. She came to Hawaii. And she had a very long and significant and storied and productive career in philanthropy in the islands. And so I remember being kind of dragged around, like, it's like elementary school kid, like young elementary school kid, and going to, this home that's being built and just kind of being bewildered. It's like what's going on here? It's like they're building this house. It looks like the house has a lot of rooms and there's a lot of girls in this house, a lot of young girls. Like, what's up with this? And that was, Halikipa and kind of the beginning of Halikipa. And so my mother was very involved in that. In the mid-'70s, she became the executive director of the Hawaii Refugee Resettlement Organization, which is now Pacific Gateway. And so in the mid-'70s, this was kind of the height of the exodus of Vietnamese out of Vietnam, into the States. And so a lot of Vietnamese were coming into the islands. And by now I'm like in high school, and my mom asked me to form like a basketball team of, a lot of these Vietnamese refugees, because that was like what she was in charge of, right? And so, I definitely had a head start in business because by dint of my father's family and kind of they were, the real estate people. I understood at a pretty early age kind of the basics of business, right? The basics of business relationships, right? But really, in many ways, a lot of what drives me today is more on the philanthropic community side. And that really came from my mother's side. And I think her experience as an immigrant and then being transported to Hawaii and like just kind of really being a leader in the community in a very quiet way. I mean, kind of one other item is she and Herb Cornell, the late Herb Cornell, and Jeff Watanabe and Walter Dodds, and I'm sure a bunch of other very important business people created the food bank, the Hawaii Food Bank. And so, a lot of these mechanisms that we kind of take for granted now, Pacific Gateway, Hawaii Food Bank, Halikipa, organizations that are alive and well, strong today, like she was like kind of really the spearhead around a lot of those. And that image, that vision has done a lot to kind of push me in the direction that I've wanted to go in my life.
What would you say then is your favorite memory with your mom?
Like I said, she was an immigrant. And I mean, the family grew up really poor in Oregon and all ended up highly prosperous restaurateurs, like literally owning Chinese restaurants, right? That's what they did. And so she was always like really kind of imbuing those immigrant kinds of traits, right? It's like, working hard was super important to her. Like, and she'd always say, like, it doesn't matter. I don't care what you do. I just care that you do it and you work hard at it and you be good at it. Like whatever you do, you got to be good at, right? She was pretty, hard scrabble is kind of one way to put it. She was also incredibly empathetic to people. And she was always the person that worried about the person that didn't quite have enough or didn't quite fit in. And so in a lot of ways, it's kind of interesting because Hawaii is a little bit of a fit in kind of place. Mm-hmm. She was always, kind of on the outside looking in on that front. And so when people talk about like, like this whole private school thing, or Hawaii's like a very closed place socially, or it's a place with haves and have-nots. And, I kind of get that. And I kind of get that from her perspective, as an outsider who was kind of brought into this marketplace.
So what would you say is something that people assume about you, just from the broader people that don't necessarily know you? It's super not true.
I try to be pretty open and honest. I think, that's a precept that's important to me. I think it's important to me to be like, who you are. It's hard. I think it would be hard to be who you're not. So you might as well be who you are. I probably am more blunt than maybe I should be, or than most people. I mean, Hawaii can also be a place where like, you don't want to like say things sometimes, right? I tend to err otherwise. So yeah, I guess maybe my bark is a lot greater than my bite. Maybe that's one. But I don't really think too much about what people think of me, to be honest with you.
Or it's not so much what they think about you, but like, what is something that might be surprising that people wouldn't necessarily know?
Terrible country club sportsman. I actually played golf until Leah was born. So she's 14 now. So I gave it up 14 years ago. And ostensibly I gave it up because I said, well, now our second kid's born. I got to like give up something. So I'm going to give up golf. The reality is I was never any good at golf, right? So golf, tennis, not good at. Skiing, terrible at, to the point where I've just kind of given up on it. And, and it's great because, my wife's a great skier. She's taught our kids to be like expert skiers, and like, they don't like skiing with dad. It's like, don't bring dad because he sucks. And so now when we ski, like I just, like hang out on the slopes and like read a book or something. So that's, I think that's one element. I'm a pretty normal person, I think.
So what would you say then has been your greatest challenge that you've had to deal with? And then how did you overcome it?
Since I've been home, so it's been a lot of years now, my schedule's been like crazy. And then you layer kids into that, like 2 kids that, we care desperately about. And just making it all work is a huge challenge. And people ask a lot, like, how you have like these lunches with interns or first years or, young people in the organization. They always ask like, well, how do you maintain a work-life balance, right? And I don't lie. I just like, well, it's really hard. It's really hard. And you just kind of define, how you make it work. And for me, like that has really been at the hands of, my wife, Michelle. And fortunately, we have that kind of relationship where she's really the person that kind of is there making it work, helping to make it work. Does huge double duty as a parent, candidly, and also is there to say, hey, you know what, like you weren't at this and that, you need to be at that, right? So that's, that clearly is kind of a personal challenge that, look, we've stepped into. I don't want to feel, I don't want anyone to think that I feel anyone should feel sorry about that. I definitely don't. But that's been our life for 20 something years now. And that's fine. I've enjoyed my life. It's been great. Sure, I'd love to have spent more time with our kids, but that's kind of a conscious decision that we made. And, I think we've got a good relationship. I think we spend quality time with each other. Professionally, the biggest challenge has been, I think, the realization that the bank really operates in conflict of 2 realities, right? We talked a little bit about this already, but one is Bank of Hawaii will only be successful as the Bank of Hawaii, right? We won't be successful as the Bank of Hawaii in Encino, California. That's not going to work, right? So we need to do that. But the world of banking, the product of banking, if you will, is changing dramatically, like by the day. And it's not being defined by what's happening here. It's being defined by what's happening in the world, right? And so making us successful and keeping us successful has to do with understanding what's happening out in the real world, right? Outside of Hawaii. And I do kind of think of anything outside of Hawaii as the real world, right? In a good way, I say that. And being able to bring that back and somehow bolt that into our operation, but always in a way that is uniquely Hawaiian, that is uniquely Bank of Hawaii. And I think, that will forever be our challenge, right? And hopefully, in a few years, we'll be able to make that transition to somebody else. But I will always believe that will always be kind of the incumbent challenge of whomever is at the helm of Bank of Hawaii. It's like, how do you take advantage of the incredible brand and market we have here while still realizing that the world evolves and it's evolving faster and faster. And you can't be yesterday's product, but with a great brand in a small market. That's not going to work. You got to be like today's product with that great brand in a small market.
Who would you say has been your greatest mentor?
Lots of mentors. My own father has been like a man of few words. And those who know Stuart TK Ho know, like he truly is a man of few words. But when he speaks, people listen and I listen. And his advice, has always been very sagely. Larry Johnson, I've been exceedingly lucky in people being incredibly generous with their time with me at mentorship, as well as kind of saying, hey, I'm going to take a chance on this kid. And that list includes Larry Johnson, who very early on, while Larry was with, the CEO of the company, was supportive and I had a lot to learn from him. And it's sad. I mean, circumstances get in the way of things sometimes. And that's kind of what happened, I think, to Larry's regime as CEO. Mike O'Neill was like, the guy who became chairman of Citigroup was someone who, I'd sit and he'd like tell me like what I should be doing and shouldn't be doing. A guy like Alton Kuyoka, who, was a vice chair, retired, like known, kind of a banker's banker in town. And he was so different. I mean, Alton's like, I'm a Punahou kid and he was a Kalani kid. And, I speak reasonably good English. He spoke, Pidgin. But we clicked and I think we were kind of aligned in our differences, really. And he would say things to me like, I'm just trying to help you get out of your own way. Like stuff like that. Or I'm trying to help you from doing the stupid thing that you're about to do. He was that direct with me. So I've had lots of mentors over the years.
So let's say with Alton then, what's your favorite memory of him or with him?
My very favorite memory of Alton is we're at this company, Pauhana, and he's talking to Joji Seta, and Joji ran the Japan marketing group. And he said, this is very much Alton, right? He said, oh, Joji, you're so good at taking me to visit all of your clients in Japan. I really appreciate that. That's so great, Joji. Thank you so much. Not like Peter Ho, who never takes me to visit any of his clients. Okay, so I'm like, oh, shit. Like, okay, so I get it. So, next thing, I had a lot of the mainland territory for the bank. And so I said, Alton, I think we should like take a trip to Seattle and visit Costco and Nordstrom's and, all those people doing business in the islands. Said, oh, no, that's a good idea. Let's do that, Peter. Thank you. So I set that up and I picked him up at the airport. This is like the mid-90s. And it was, my bag didn't come through. Like, your bag? Like, you checked in a bag? It's like, yeah, I checked in a bag and my bag didn't come through. I'm like, oh. So, but that's okay. Like, I got my suit, like, in my carry-on. Okay, good. And he said, but my medication is in the bag. I said, like, ooh, that's not so good. I said, what kind of medication is it, Alton? He goes, oh, it's my heart medication. I'm like, that sounds serious. He goes, screw it. If I die, that's your problem. So we went for like 3 days and he didn't die. He was fine. His heart was fine.
What's a story you can share with your father that would kind of get a good idea of how much he meant to you?
Like I said, he didn't have hours of advice, but he definitely had parameters, right? And he said, like, when you graduate, there's no coming home. Not like you can come to Hawaii, that's fine. But if you come to Hawaii, like, you're not living with us. That's just the way it's going to be. And there was like no reason why I couldn't have, except that he just thought like for his kid, like you just need to let them know that's the boundary. It's like, and things are different today.
You think he would have?
No, I think he was serious. Oh. And I took him as serious. There's like, I can't show up because he'd be like, okay, like you can stay tonight, but where are you going tomorrow? And that, that was motivating to me. It's like, I got to get a job, and I got to get a job that's going to pay enough for me to actually pay rent. And so my first apartment in New York was with 4 other guys in like a 600-foot apartment, right? Those were like very intentional lessons that he kind of put out there for me developmentally.
So what do you think his words would have been if it was more compassionate type of words? Like, what was he actually saying?
I'm so proud of, where you've gotten to, and you're going to have a great life. And I just really think it's important for you to step out on your own.
Yeah.
But that got translated into, you're not living with us. Don't even think it.
I have to do that translation to myself a lot of times in dealing with the older folks, or what do we want to call them? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. it's not what they mean. I have to do it with my wife too. And no, that's not what they mean.
Yeah.
What they just said was, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
It's so hard to understand because that's, yeah.
Well, life is better when you think in terms of what they potentially could have meant.
Yeah. Especially for people who don't say a whole lot.
Right.
So with your father then, because I know that you guys are close, so what would be like the most meaningful memory you have with him?
My father, is a great guy, a great man. He's no angel. And, there were periods when my parents were split up.
Oh.
And, I was obviously pretty angry about that. But, he never stopped trying to be a father, right? And I think it was hard for him. He's 88 now, right? And, for whatever reason, that's where he was in his life. But he always kind of made the effort, and it wasn't like completely checked out. And, at the time, I kind of, I don't think I was very appreciative of that. I was probably more angry than anything, right? But, with, now at 58, you kind of look back and, think about your own frailties and kind of how the world works. And you have, the benefit of seeing how a lot of other peers, parents treated them and how things worked out, and nothing's perfect. And, I appreciated that.
So if he doesn't have that many words for you, do you normally have that many words when you talk to him? Or is it a lot of times you're just spending time together?
Relationships get grooved pretty early. And, ours wasn't like, we didn't have like 2-hour conversation. Never. I mean,
You mean in a single shot?
Yeah, in a single shot. Maybe like in a single year.
Okay.
That's not to say that he isn't a social guy. He is. And what's fun is like my son, Khan, is like a very gabby guy. He has a gift of gab. He loves to talk, and he's very interested and loves history, has an interest in the law. My dad's a lawyer, and they get along famously. And they can sit and have like 1 hour and 39-minute conversations on all sorts of stuff. And I think that's great. And they can do that, and that's kind of their relationship. And like I said, like I don't think I've had a 30-minute conversation with my dad.
To tell you where I'm kind of going with it on this is that a lot of times we don't say to the actual person what we would like to say, right? But then they watch something like this. So with that in mind, you can, if you want or not, like what would you say to him that maybe you wouldn't typically say in person because it's kind of awkward or whatever? Like what would you want him to know?
Well, I think very squarely that our family growing up had its ups and downs within the nuclear dynamic, right? And having survived that, lived through that, aging to 58 now, looking back, seeing kind of how the world works, frailties of people and humans and all of us, right? I guess where I've evolved to is I'm just appreciative of the relationship that we've had. And there have been some great elements to it. And he has been incredibly generous on many dimensions to me. And not so much on others. But you know what? That's okay. And I think that's a viewpoint, that's a way of thinking about life different from certainly a decade ago or certainly 20 years ago.
What's your favorite memory with Michelle?
Our favorite memory, probably, and we did like this super honeymoon in Europe. But Michelle's a traveler, right? And I'm not really a traveler. And so we went to Europe and we did it up. I mean, we stayed at these incredible hotels and chateaus and stuff. And we went to a place called Les Beaux, stayed in a castle, stayed in a place called Ez, which is basically built into the side of a cliff on the coast. And, the hotel is literally probably 40 feet wide, built into a cliff. And it's got a pool like built into the hotel. And you're kind of like staring down into the Mediterranean every day. I mean, it's just incredible. So memory-wise, probably that. There are lots of great memories, and kind of the most exotic ones aren't necessarily the best. They may be the most memorable, right? But, the great thing that I feel about my marriage is just the seasons, right? And, there's a season like when you first get married, you have no kids. And, that was a lot of fun and different, obviously, a lot more freedom. But then having kids and having like our first kid and the second kid and like watching them develop, it's been a great ride for me. You'd have to ask her about her experience, but for me, it's been great.
How about something that you really appreciate about Michelle that others may not know about if they met her for the first time?
Michelle's a little bit of an open book. So I don't think that it will be anything that other people don't realize or recognize in her. And this is a great lesson opportunity for all of us. Just truly a kind person and someone that kind of meets people with no expectation and nothing but goodwill from the moment you meet. Now, if things go south from there, like in that experience, and then they do. I mean, she's savvy, but just, an openness to kind of meet people, bring on people, really try to understand their dynamic is something that she's really gifted at. And so we were just in New York, and I mean, she has like dozens of friends in any city you go to. It's crazy. From, hula when she was 8 to college friends to friends she met after college. I mean, it's just incredible relationship collector.
When did you know that she was the one?
Pretty much from the second that I met her.
Oh.
Yeah.
And how did you guys meet then?
Oh, that's debatable.
Oh.
That's debatable.
So what about the meeting when you said pretty much when I met her? What was that meeting like?
Well, we met in San Francisco. I knew her brother, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I kind of knew that there was a Michelle Kondo, but I didn't really know her really. And then I was in San Francisco. My mother lived in San Francisco. And so I'd always try to route my trips to the mainland through San Francisco. I'd stop in and check in on her. So I was there, and somebody told me, I can't remember who, that they were going to be in town and Michelle Kondo was going to be with them. And why don't you come out? So we went to this, it was like a Mediterranean bar down in Union Square. And we met and kind of hit it off. And I thought we hit it off. But she was seeing someone at the time.
Oh.
And so I would have thought that would be a great person to go out, but she was taken, right? And so then I stalked her from the side, I guess. And that relationship eventually petered out. And then we, started dating back in Honolulu, right? So it's interesting because she'd gone to school on the East Coast, gone to work on the West Coast, and then came home. I'd gone to school on the West Coast, gone to work on the East Coast, and then came home. And so we had kind of very similar kind of post-high school experiences, but that we both met as we'd come back to the islands.
So with your kids, we'll start with Khan. What is it about Khan that is something you find truly special?
He's a kind kid, and we're relieved at that. I mean, that to us, that's, kind of starts and ends there. But on top of that, I mean, he, like I alluded to earlier, he's incredibly curious with a good intellect. I mean, bright kid, curious, but really just kind of loves to absorb things. He was a football player and, really gets into being a football player. I mean, it's important to him. He's on the food committee for Carnival, and he's really into that. I mean, he puts his heart and soul into that. He's on a county Honolulu commission that he was elected to or selected to, and he's really into that. He did an internship for one of the state Supreme Court justices, so I'd pick him up after he did that every day, and he loved doing that. And he'd say well, I learned some really interesting stuff today. And I said, well, what'd you learn? He's like, I can't tell you. It's confidential. And I said, okay. And then we'd be driving, and then he'd drop he's like, Dad, you'd be amazed how many things get done behind closed doors. Oh, okay. And then a week later, we'd see something on the news that some state policy thing. And I'd say, oh yeah, no, that was the thing I couldn't tell you about. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So he's just a really fun, curious kid that really enjoys lots of different things, and it's fun to be around.
So what would be one thing you would like him to know that maybe you've never told him?
I try to be very expressive to our kids in ways that certainly my father was not expressive to me. So I don't think that there's really anything that I've not told. I mean, I try not to be that classic Chinese father, right? I probably not as good at it as kind of what I think in my mind's eye, but I try very hard to do that. So I don't know, Evan, that there's a lot that I haven't tried to express to him.
Or how about something that you would like to express to him, or maybe reinforce that you would really like him to know?
Kindness is so important. Not that's, something I do exceptionally well, but something that I try to do well. But I know for both Michelle and myself, that's kind of foundational And if and as you've achieved that, then, being excited and being active and, going after the world with gusto is like important. And he's doing that. So, we're excited about that. I guess, and, maybe one other thing is, maybe I'm making it up, but I think it's true. We've not really pushed our kids exceptionally hard. I mean, kind of like normal things, of course, but I think both Michelle and I consciously have tried not to force our kids to be one thing or another. Just kind of allow them to be whatever they're going to be and be happy at that. And that seems to have gone well. I mean, he's kind of a naturally ambitious fellow, naturally tries to do well at whatever he's doing. So maybe we've been lucky there. But intentionally, we tried not to be like overbearing, overpowering parents. And that goes for Leah, obviously, as well.
So with that then, for your daughter, what makes her special to you?
Well, they're very different. And when they were kids, Con would be in coming out of Long's in Kahalas, like that parking lot. And Con would be like racing ahead. And Leah would be like, like 2 years old. And she'd be like screaming at the top of her lungs saying, Con, stop, like afraid, like worried and managing her brother, right? And that's Leah. She takes everything in all at once and, can calculate like what's happening and what you ought to be worried about in the moment. Really talented, really bright girl. Not as, wanting to talk about Napoleonic wars like Con would want to, but, bright in a different way, like very quick, very like Wall Street quick, like, just like gets it really fast, understands motives very quickly, understands kind of the bigger picture or the subplot happening in a pretty sophisticated way. So that's Leah. It's interesting. I mean, being a boy, being a girl, my view is it's still very much a man's world in lots of different professions. Tech, Wall Street, legal, I mean, you name it. And probably is going to be for a while. So kind of one of the added dimensions that I think about, I know Michelle thinks about, for our daughter, is like, how do you manage that, right? And how do you, whereas it's probably not necessary with Con because, he's a boy, right? He's a guy in a man's world. With her, it's kind of how do you help create understanding around that? And how do you solution around that? And I think that's a delicate one, right? You don't want to be the person pounding the table because that's probably not effective. But you also don't want to be the person that just kind of pretends like the issue's not there. So that's just another dimension to how we're trying to raise, a child who is growing into a young woman.
And then if you told like one thing that you appreciate about her.
Leah's a little bit more like me than Con is. And so she's a little more closed and guarded. It's weird. I probably have not told Leah I love her as much as I've told Con I love him. But that's because, Leah and I are kind of, we're a little bit of the Chinese father types, and Con's kind of a different kind of person. So yeah, I mean, definitely what I would want her to know, that I think she knows, I hope she knows, is that, our love for her is unconditional, no matter what.
I just wanted to thank you, Peter. I know your schedule is super packed and you're doing a lot of important things, and you took time out of your schedule to spend with me. So I just want to acknowledge you for, being a good friend and for all the good works that you do and being a good father.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing this. I did get a chance to listen to some of the product, and it's good stuff. It's great stuff. And, I think it gives perspectives that are interesting, unique. So hopefully this will be helpful to some.
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you. If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.